Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. All right, now to maybe the meat of the conversation that some of you might have been sticking around for. Should Kansas move on at the defensive coordinator position? Well, let's start here. KU just gave up 38 points to a not great Iowa State offense, who came in the previous 4 games averaging just a hair over 20 points per game. Rocco Becht had been struggling. He had 13 touchdowns or 12 touchdowns and 9 interceptions this year. And yet they made Rocco Becht look like Peyton Manning. Let's evaluate this first, right? So I think first of all, you would have to say the defense is a mess structurally, right? Like we're still talking about lining up incorrectly, missed assignments, going to the wrong gaps. Now, could you point to the players there and say, hey, some of that's on you? Yes, absolutely. I think you also point to the coach who's teaching them, right? What are you teaching them? And then it's a conversation of, okay, is what you're teaching them too complicated? Do you need to dumb it down? Which, sure, that would not be ideal, but you're recruiting the players. So get smarter players or ones who understand it, or dumb it down, or like, I don't know what it is. It's just like, it's not working, right? And it does feel like a bit of it is lining up. Like, why are corners and DBs so far off of the opposing receivers so often? And even with them being so far off, players are just running wide open, whether it's 15 yards downfield, 30 yards downfield, or 5 yards downfield. It's just that's the case here. Then you're sending blitzes, which at times they have had some good blitzes this year. But it certainly felt like in this game, and there have been other moments throughout the season, where some of the KU blitzes have been, hey, this is a DB who's going to blitz. And it's like, okay, if you're blitzing from the slot, great. But you're blitzing when you're playing 8 yards off the ball, or you're so far away from the quarterback, by the time you get in there, by the time you even get to the offensive lineman, he's throwing the football. It doesn't matter. Other times where you're blitzing right into where the protection is, whether it's the quarterback, you're not disguising it good enough, or it keeps showing up on film so they know what's coming, or it's just designed that way. Now, here's what Lance Leipold said in the postgame. This is from Matt Tate. He said he notes that there were a lot of issues defensively that they can't see keep happening. Says it's not the players' fault. That's on the coaches to coach and teach to get them to execute better. I mean, if that's not like a point of a finger to what's going on, then I don't really know what is. Now, he did, I guess, come back on that a little bit. I wonder if he was like, hey, maybe I went a little too strong there. He also said, this again from Matt Tate of R1S1, some of the problem defensively is that there are a bunch of guys who want to play hard and make plays and often try to do too much, when the idea of being 1-on-11 and doing their job would best serve KU overall. So again, is that an issue with who you recruited? Is that an issue in how you're teaching it? Is that an issue of just, with how the season snowballed, players are trying to do too much and it's becoming too individualized in that way? Regardless, this does kind of come back to the coach and trying to have to put it together. And I can't help but think, like I look at Iowa State's numbers. They came into this game 68th in the country in passing yards per game, 56th in the country in yards per attempt passing, 78th in the country in QB rating, 103rd in the country in touchdown to interception ratio, 63rd in the country in explosive pass rate. And none of that mattered. KU got torched in the back end. And I look back to DK McDonald's history. He was the assistant defensive back coach at Iowa State. And then he became the or I think he was, I don't know, it was like corners or safeties, and then became like the full DB coach. But whatever. He was at Iowa State from 2016 to 2020. Here are their rankings, Iowa State defensively, in yards allowed per pass. 2016, they were 72nd. This is nationally. 2017, they were 71st. 2018, they were 44th. 2019, they were 38th. And 2020, they were 74th. Since he left, 2021, they were 39th. 2022, they were 35th. 2023, they were 32nd. 2024, 23rd. This year, big step back because they've had a billion injuries. They're 66th. But this year's been their worst year since, he left, and it's still better than the final season he was there. And those numbers are before KU played, so those numbers actually went up for them. But they've been better since he left. You look at DK McDonald in his time at Philadelphia with the Eagles. He was the assistant DB's coach when they were really good in 2021 and 2022. They were 10th in yards allowed per pass in 21. They were first in 22. So then he gets a promotion to be the main defensive backs coach, and they go 19th in yards allowed per pass with that loaded Eagles defense. He leaves to go to KU, obviously, and the Eagles these last 2 years, first in 2024, ninth in 2025 so far in yards allowed per pass. So there is kind of a trend that things are not getting better with the area that McDonald is supposed to be specializing in. And I point to all that. I point to all the stuff at the beginning. Now you add to it that, like, okay, you would want, if you have this good scheme or a really good coach, you would want them to perform well off the bye. You would also want it not to be figure outable. That's not a word, but not to be figure outable, for lack of a better term, for the other team when they're coming off a bye, to where it just takes one extra week and then you have everything figured out against this KU defense. Because think about this. These are the teams that KU played when the other team is coming off a bye this year. Cincinnati, they had like 600 yards of offense and you couldn't stop them. Kansas State, who scored over 40 points, and Iowa State, who put up 38 points, and had the game been closer, they could have easily put up more. So when the other team had a bye week and had extra prep to basically figure out, hey, that's an issue with this defense. That's an issue with this defense. That's not structurally sound. They're lining up wrong there. We can attack this, this, and this. They were able to dice it up. So I say this. I feel like we have a Jeff Grimes situation on our hand. It is clear this coordinator hire did not work for Lance Leipold. And I've been trying all year long to be optimistic. I appreciated some of the different formations they were using, but then you start to get into it a little bit more, and you just have defensive ends. I mean, Leroy Harris, I mentioned coming into the week, who's been an awesome pass rusher in DN this year, has dropped into coverage before today 41 times coming into the season. And those numbers reflect for a guy like Dean Miller and stuff too on the outside. And I just look at this and I'm like, oh, but his buyout's $1 million. Is it actually going to happen? And this becomes interesting to me. It is getting to a point where Lance Leipold is getting close to, if not on the hot seat for Kansas. I don't think that KU will make a move regardless of what happens with Utah. But I do think 2026 becomes a very interesting and important season for the KU staff. And to that notion, if you're a donor, if you're a big money donor, there's two opinions you could have on this. One, hey, I want you to prove it to me that you can win before I shell out $1 million to buy out your DC so you can get a new one. Why would I allow you to make that higher when, you know, with Grimes and now with this one, it hasn't worked out? I'm not going to trust you with it. I'm not going to donate. That's possibly one opinion for a big money donor. The other opinion you could possibly have, you know, we're going to give you the opportunity. I'm going to make this move, but it's basically going to set your fate in. It's going to seal your fate because I'm making this big donation to buy out this defensive coordinator for you to undo your mistake. And now, if you don't perform this year, you have no excuses to go back to. And we're going to have the writing on the wall. Versus if you make the move and I make the donation and you make a great hire and it works out for you, then you earned it and you proved your way. So I do think it is time for KU to find, I mean, I guess you finish out the season. It's 1 week to go. But find a new defensive coordinator for KU. This just hasn't worked for Kansas. And we're so late in the season and still in the weekly press conferences, you still hear about, you know, lining up in the wrong area or doing the wrong assignment or whatever. And at some point, it's like, what are you teaching? Where are guys going? What is the scheme? Because I refuse to believe that all of these KU players on the defensive end are just stupid. I don't think – okay, even if Kansas isn't the smartest team in the world, even if they're, you know, not a bunch of Ivy League kids, I don't think they're stupid. I don't think these players are like 9-10 weeks into the season being like, man, I don't know where to line up. I think it's just being taught weird or it's being taught wrong or in a way that they don't understand or in a way that's not being communicated right. And you need somebody who can communicate it right and do it in a way that is going to allow this defense to, for the first time in the Lance Leipold era, because we haven't seen it yet, be a top 50 defense nationally. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. See you next time with LOJ.